This is a pretty low cost, I think, for Rozier, all things considered. Yes, you're giving up a first. Yes, you could say, does that keep you out of an all-in offer for a star player come the summer? Well, number one, the Heat could have done that for Dame last summer and chose not to. Who's to say they aren't just going to do that again? And secondly, I think Rozier is going to make them better right now. It's a cold end for Lowry and his run in Miami, certainly. But this team is now better for getting Tyler Rozier. He's going to be awesome there. And, we'll see where they end up in the standings. But I just, once again, do not want anything to do with the Miami Heat when it comes to the playoffs. I want to be as far away from them as I possibly can if I'm another team in the East.
So I look at it from, I guess, three different standpoints as far as if it'll work. But first, it is quite a bit to give up. I mean, if that pick ends up being, unprotected in 2028, and let's just say it's like 16th, just straight up, right down the middle, basically, it's a pretty good pick. And I'm not optimistic the Hornets can get something for Lowry at the deadline. I don't really know who's trading for him at this point, but the 16th pick for a guy that they were completely ready to move on from is pretty good. And for Miami, it's a pretty big bet that they'll improve a lot and be good in 2028, I guess, too. But the three things I would look at from a fit standpoint: defensively, can he rediscover his Boston form? He's small, but can he at least guard, guards solidly? Miami covers up for a lot with the way that they scheme, the amount of zone they play, and Bam. So he's in a great environment, but that's obviously question number one because he's been on a bad team for a while and those habits have formed. The second thing to me would be how do he and Tyler Herro fit? Miami only had a 114 offensive rating with both Herro and Lowry on across the past two seasons. That's really not great. It's not much. Herro's fit and raising of their ceiling has been, obviously debated a lot. They made the finals without him. Can Rozier make him better? Does Rozier make him more expendable? How does that all map out, I think, is an open question. I think he's somewhat of a similar player to Gabe Vincent, Rozier is, in terms of a guy who can take pull-up threes and be on or off the ball, and I think he's better than Vincent offensively, but we've seen that work before. We've seen that work without Herro and with, so that's a question to me. And then the last one would just be his passing, and Nekias Duncan had a good thread on this earlier today, which I'm sure people have seen, but it's not so much Rozier specifically, it's just that's kind of the one thing offensively that Lowry was really doing for this team at this point, was whether it's obviously the head-to-head passes that he's known for or just his ability to kind of get them going, get a slight advantage going downhill and start the churn of the offense, enter the ball to the right place and space correctly off of that, whatever, the basics of being a point guard. Rozier's not really that type of player, so what does that do to change their offense? I think would be another open question, but I think they just needed juice. They're like 21st in offense right now, and so regardless of how all that stuff works, I think he just gives them another creator that they really, really needed. But which one of those stands out to you, or what are you looking at from a fit standpoint?
I think it's the last one. I think it's just he gives them another creator they needed. This is exactly the kind of guy that I think is going to amplify them. The Herro fit, I think, will be interesting for them to navigate. I think it just adds more possible ammunition in the summer that maybe Herro is someone they should move and try to find a different kind of energy with, or that he isn't going to matter for them in the playoffs. I think that's entirely possible. But Rozier's having because he plays for the Hornets, a low-key underrated, very, very good season. He's at 53% on twos, which would be a career best. He's shooting nearly 36% from three on nearly 8 attempts a game. He's capable of putting up big numbers. He's capable of being a solid enough, maybe not a lead creator, but he's averaging a career best 6.6 assists this year versus 2.1 turnovers. He's having just a great year. And I think you put him in the system where he's playing with Jimmy Butler and within the Eric Spoelstra system, and they have Bam Adebayo doing stuff and all these different guys. I think he's just going to fit in and also give them some energy that they're missing. Give them another guy who's absolutely fearless, who's going to be up for these moments. Brendon, there's certain guys that I think I would look at a little bit and say, okay, are we sure that they're going to fit in with the Heat system and culture? Like, I think that there's reason to look at certain guys and be skeptical. I have no concerns about that with what Rozier is and how he plays and what he seems to be about, right? Like, I just, sure, will it be like an acclimation process to some degree? Yes, there always is. And, Jimmy's in and out of the lineup and how fast you can build a camaraderie with all their best guys will be a challenge for them, for sure. But I just don't think Rozier's going to go in and be overwhelmed by this environment. I think he's going to go in and thrive even more as a result of it. That would make me super optimistic if I'm the Miami Brain Trust.
Yeah, a few other reasons to be optimistic, I would say, are Charlotte plays slow also. I think that's one of the things that can be a little bit of a shell shock to teams, to players coming onto this Miami team is if you're a guy who wants to get out and kind of spread your wings and just control a few run-out possessions or semi-transition, and that's kind of how you get comfortable, how you get yours. Obviously, Miami's defense creates those opportunities, but they're not a run-and-gun team. They're a very structured team, and so Charlotte might not be structured, but they are slow. I think that's good. And then the other part is he was a very good off-screen scorer in Boston. He didn't have to do it in Charlotte because he had the ball so much and they, again, lacked structure. But it actually did kind of surprise me. When they had Mason Plumlee, they did run a lot of dribble handoff stuff. So I don't know why Rozier didn't excel there. But he did with the Celtics. And so I think that's something that you could really see him thrive again in with Bam and whoever else it is, Hawkes, and that's a lot of how the Heat like to run offense, and that would mitigate what do we do without Lowry's passing is just rely on that stuff even more. Obviously, come playoff time, the ball will be in Jimmy's hands more and more, but those would be two, I think, places I would see them leaning into what he's been good at before, currently good at right now, and yeah, I think to your point, right, like you catch a guy in the middle of a career best season, you'd be dumb not to do a little bit more of what he's great at too. So I think there will just be games where he cooks and he's firing pull-up threes and they're comfortable with that and kind of let him do that and rest some guys, and maybe Herro and Robinson play a little less those nights. But that's why you acquire a guy like this. That's why you trade a first-round pick for somebody, is you believe in them. So you got to do what they're good at too.
Last thing we'll say about him, Brendon, is I don't really care too much about them as far as star player hunting. Like I think if they're going to do it, they're going to find a way to do it anyway. That's just usually how this works. I get kind of wondering if incremental upgrades are always worth a first, but I don't really think they're losing a lot here as far as future trade assets to get this over the line and maybe make a big deal in the summer. Do you have any strong thoughts about that side of this?
Well, Rozier's under contract for a while too, right? So it isn't necessarily salary, and it's not like a rental. Right, so you're trading for this guy to ideally, like if he continues to be impactful into his 30s, like now that's a guard, that's a starting guard for you for the rest of his contract. So I think that makes it extra worthwhile. I think that I don't know. I mean, I hate to give them slack. I think that there's various moves that they could have or should have made in the past, but in the right now, I don't think that there's anything wrong with treating this moment in time, after what we saw Butler do, especially in the first two rounds last year, as the remainder of the Jimmy window, and treat him as your best player and rely on him to be capable and find ways to support around that rather than supplanting him or dramatically overhauling what your team identity is. So I wouldn't be surprised if they made another small move before the deadline this year and just ran back a better version of last year's roster rather than saying, okay, now we have our next foundational star and we're going to be great for the next 10 years and how are him and Jimmy going to fit? It's sort of just like, no, this is still Jimmy and Bam, and how do we make it better around that? And I think that's kind of going to be their approach, at least for the remainder of this season.